So let's talk about something that's reshaped the very foundation of modern elections: dark money. You might have heard the term tossed around, but what does it actually mean? Well, in simple terms, it's political funds from sources that aren't disclosed to the public. And the key here is that lack of transparency. It creates this massive shadow in our democratic processes where the influence isn't just significant, it's invisible. Let's take a look at this clip where the investigative reporter defines dark money and discusses how dark money can affect political campaigns. Play
CBS
this
News
clip.
investigation is shedding light on dark money in political campaigns and the role they're already playing in this year's election. Those are donations that are made where the source and the donor are undisclosed. CBS News investigative reporter Daniel Kleidman has been following this story, and he is here with us now in Studio 57 to explain what he found. Always great to have you, Daniel. You write about a single anonymous donation of $64 million that helped Joe Biden get elected in 2020. What do we know about the source of that funding and how it was made its way into the primary Biden super PAC?
Well, we know almost nothing about the source of that funding, which is why this is an important story. Look, in July of 2020, a C4, a tax-exempt organization that no one had ever heard of, just kind of popped up out of the blue and received a donation for $64 million from a single anonymous source. That is a staggering amount of money. Most people believe it came from one very wealthy pro-Biden individual, but it could have come from another entity, from a privately held corporation or from an LLC, but we just don't know. That money then moved from the impetus fund, which was this 501c4, to the nonprofit arm of the main Biden super PAC called Future Forward USA Action. Now, Fords, these tax-exempt organizations, they don't have to say who their donors are. But a few weeks later, in October, just before the election, $60 million was moved from Future Forward USA Action to Future Forward, which is the Biden super PAC. Super PACs do have to disclose who their donors are, but the donor in this case was their nonprofit arm.
Right, which we don't know.
Right. No one knows what Future Forward USA Action is or who's behind that. And so, good government groups and people who are concerned about the lack of transparency in the system are really concerned about this trend, which has been going on for quite a while now, because voters can't assess what are the interests and the agendas that lie behind all of that money. An individual who gives $64 million to a political cause likely wants something in return for that, but we don't know what that would be.
And so this is, focused on the Biden campaign, this particular example, but Republicans are doing it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, just last week, one of these dark money 501c4s popped up in Pennsylvania and is spending $2 million ads attacking Biden on behalf of Trump about how he's ignored the inflation issue. So it is happening on both sides. Ironically, the Democrats have actually excelled in the raising of dark money over the last few cycles and have surpassed the Republicans. I say ironically because philosophically, the Democrats and Joe Biden himself are opposed to dark money. Joe Biden in 2022 went out into the White House briefing room and said dark money erodes trust, but they're continuing to do it. And the reason is they believe that they shouldn't have to unilaterally disarm, as they would put it, that the stakes are so high in this election, or as one Democratic strategist put it to me, you don't show up at a gunfight with a knife.
I read a fascinating book by Jane Meyer called Dark Money. And can you just explain to people how this all started? It wasn't always like this.
It was not always like this. Look, we are actually at the 50th anniversary of the first really big campaign reform in the modern era. It happened in the wake of Watergate. Back then, there was unlimited amounts of money coming into campaigns. People were still bringing money in suitcases and brown paper bags. Those reforms happened. And then over the years, there were more reforms, but then they were sort of chipped away at. And the big moment was Citizens United in 2010, when the Supreme Court said, you can give unlimited amounts, you being companies, unions, individuals, can give unlimited amounts of money to independent political committees, PACs, for example. The bargain they thought they were striking was, but in exchange, those donations have to be disclosed. What they did not anticipate as they ushered in the age of the super PAC was these C4s could be used as devices for concealing money, and that money eventually would find its way into these super PACs and get used to support candidates.
So why not just go So why not just go back and amend that amendment?
Yeah. Well, if you think, Vlad, that we could get both parties together and agree on this, I've got some.
Yeah. Okay. Why am I even asking that question? Why am I even asking that? I mean, yes.
So this might be sort of a simple question, but so these tax-exempt entities, these 501c4s, I mean, in order to create one of those, I would think that there would be a paper trail, that you have to sort of fill something out and make a request and justify why you should be tax exempt.
There is, and there are tax forms, there are 990s, there's articles of incorporation. There are those kinds of documents that can tell you when the organization was formed, and some of these cases, who donated to the 501(c)(4s, but the money that goes out, nothing about.
One of the pivotal moments in the rise of dark money was the 2010 Citizens United versus FEC decision. Essentially, that ruling allowed corporations and outside groups to spend unlimited amounts of money on political campaigns, and it opened the floodgates. Since then, we've seen billions, yes, billions, pouring into elections without anyone knowing exactly where it's all coming from or who's pulling the strings. Take this, for example. The Brennan Center for Justice found that during the 2020 election cycle alone, over $1 billion of spending came from undisclosed sources. $1 billion. That's a monumental sum. And what this does is create an environment where, voters start to question the entire process. Who are these candidates really representing? Is it the people or the entities funding their campaigns from the shadows? And this isn't just an American problem. If we look at the UK, there's a growing concern about dark money creeping into its political system too. According to The Guardian, around 10% of all political donations in Britain come from sources that are, dubious at best. And you can see how this issue transcends borders. It's not just a national problem, it's a global one, eroding trust in democracies everywhere. You start to realize the damaging ripple effects. Undisclosed money doesn't just impact election outcomes. It shifts perceptions of governance, the integrity of institutions, and even how much faith voters place in the system itself. So here's a question. How much of what we consume in the media is truly unbiased? I mean, when we think about the content we're exposed to, be it news, online videos, or even social media posts, there's often a hidden hand guiding the narrative. And that's where things can get, murky. For example, reports from the Associated Press reveal how Russian-funded media played a role in producing anti-Ukraine videos. These videos were then amplified by certain right-wing influencers. And the result? A manufactured perception shift. Not only does this undermine the broader discourse, but it also raises real questions about how easily public opinion can be manipulated with just the right amount of funding and influence. Now, let's not stop there, because there's another layer to this. James O'Keefe. Some of you may be familiar with his name. He's a conservative activist known for undercover sting operations. But what's interesting, or maybe troubling, is that in exposing others, O'Keefe inadvertently revealed how his own tactics raised serious ethical concerns. The New Yorker pointed out instances where his methods blurred the line between truth and fabrication, creating a kind of transparency paradox. He was so focused on exposing flaws in the system that his credibility took a hit. If we step back for a second, it's not just about individual stories or scandals. Media narratives, especially when funded or shaped by unclear sources, can fundamentally alter how we perceive reality. They become tools, not just for informing the public, but for swaying opinions, influencing policies, and in some cases, even shaping the outcomes of elections. So, how do we separate truth from agendas? When you're scrolling through headlines, watching videos, or even just chatting about current events, how much do we challenge what we've seen? Do we ask the tough questions, like who benefits from this narrative and who's funding it? Because honestly, If we don't stay critical, this cycle just keeps deepening. Now that we've explored the scope of dark money's influence, the question becomes, what can we do about it? This isn't just a spectator sport. There are real, tangible strategies emerging to address these challenges, both at the grassroots level and through legislative reform. Let's start with the campaigns led by everyday people, grassroots organizations. These groups are working tirelessly to push for greater transparency in political donations. One approach that's gaining traction involves online trackers and public databases, tools designed to follow the money trail. OpenSecrets.org, for example, shines a light on campaign contributions, showing voters exactly who's funding what. And honestly, these tools are empowering. They let people take control back and demand accountability. But grassroots isn't enough on its own. Legislative action has to match the scale of the problem. One of the proposals we've seen involves laws mandating full disclosure of all political donations over a certain threshold. Some states are even experimenting with public campaign financing to level the playing field. Think about it. Removing the dependency on huge contributions could fundamentally change who's able to run for office and, in turn, who they serve once elected. Still, reform efforts face an uphill battle, especially when you consider the role of well-funded lobbying networks. Take the Koch network as an example. They're infamous for opposing campaign finance reforms at every turn. The influence they wield isn't confined to a single election. It's systemic, shaping policy debates in ways that make it harder, even impossible, for transparency initiatives to gain traction. And honestly, that kind of financial power can feel like, well, a brick wall. You know, as a physician, I see parallels between this issue and the healthcare inequities I work to combat. Both come down to imbalance of power, access, and representation. Just like we battle to make sure underserved communities have a voice in healthcare, this fight for financial transparency is about giving voters their voice back. If money continues to drown out ordinary people, we risk losing the heart of what democracy is supposed to be. And while these are all pieces of a larger, complex puzzle, one thing is clear. We can't afford complacency. The systems will not fix themselves, and those benefiting from the status quo, they certainly aren't interested in changing it. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of The Real 411. I mean, wow, what a journey. There's just so much to unpack when it comes to dark money and the ways it, well, infiltrates our political systems. But here's the thing. These conversations, they don't end here, and they can't. Because it's not just the headlines or the stats that matter. It's what we do with them that makes the difference. So thank you, seriously, thank you for taking the time to listen, to reflect, and to hopefully question a little more deeply. It's your engagement, your curiosity, your boldness that makes this platform possible. If something struck a chord with you today, or if it made you go, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way, then do me a favor. Share this episode with someone. Let's keep this dialogue going because change starts with awareness. And don't forget, stay connected with us. Follow The Real 411 on all our socials. Sign up for the newsletter. It's free, by the way. And if you believe in the power of independent media, the kind that digs deeper, please consider subscribing to us on platforms like Substack or Fanbase. Your support? It makes all of this and more possible. And if nothing else, it tells us that what we're doing here, it matters. With that, I'll leave you with this. The story is never just the headline. Sometimes you got to read between the lines, challenge the narrative, and ask those tougher questions. Because at the heart of it, democracy, it's all of us. It's the voices that stand up, speak out, and refuse to stay silent. So until next time, stay informed, stay bold, and stay real. Take care, everyone.